Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are discussing next topic of the GIT. Now, upper GI bleeding, upper gastrointestinal bleeding. Sometimes the bleeding occurs from the intestinal tract. We basically divide the upper GI and lower GI from the second part of the duodenum at which the ligaments of Treitz is attached. Above that second part of duodenum where the ligament of Treitz is attached is upper GI, and from there downward up to the anal canal, this is the lower GI. So if the bleeding occurs, upper part means esophagus, stomach, and the first part of the duodenum and half of the second part of duodenum, it is upper GI bleeding. Now we see the what are the causes of the upper GI bleeding. Upper GI bleeding causes are the acid peptic disease, peptic ulcer, portal hypertension, means increased pressure in the portal veins, gastropathies and varices. Portal hypertension basically results in gastropathies and varices. When the veins are enlarged, they are engorged with bloods, they become varices, means they basically these are the veins which are whose diameters are increased and they are near to burst, they become so much enlarged. Mallory Weiss tears, because these are the tears occur due to excessive vomiting, especially in alcoholics. When the vomiting starts, due to the increased intra-abdominal pressure, the tear occur at the lower end of the esophagus and the bleeding occur. Vascular abnormalities like angiodysplasias and telangiectasia, these are basically abnormal vessels and they are easy to bleed. Gastric neoplasm and erosive gastritis due to some food which cause the erosions in the stomach. This is the picture of the angiodysplasia. This is the blood vessels and they are become so much superficial that sometimes the bleeding occur from here and then it stops suddenly and no cause is found at that area. Here is the portal vein, and the portal veins, because of the cirrhosis of the liver, cirrhosis is basically the fibrosis of the liver. When the fibrosis of the liver occurs, the liver actually shrinks and the blood vessels coming to it from the portal veins. Portal vein is far from the superior mesenteric, splenic veins and the gastric and esophageal veins. The back pressure occurs because now the fibrosis causes shrinkage and blood flow is hampered, stop. The back result in back pressure. The back pressure goes to the splenic veins. Here the veins also engorged, they become varices, and the back pressure also occurred in the esophageal area, and in the esophagus the varices form and they easily bleed on slightly and the bleeding occur. So this is very important cause of the upper GI bleeding in patient with chronic liver disease. These are the varices. These are enlarged veins which are the lower end of the esophagus. They become engorged with the blood and they easily bleed. So this is the more common cause of the upper GI bleeding in the patient with chronic liver disease. How the patient presents to us. Definitely when the bleeding occur in the stomach, hematochezia means fresh blood in the stool. Sometimes small amount of bleeding occur, then the black tarry stool passed in the from the anal canal, which is known as the melena stool. Basically we have the fixed definition of melena. It is black tarry stool, foul smelling and difficult to flush because it sticks on the pot of the flush pot and difficult to flush out. This is basically the small amount of the bleeding which occurred from the upper GI areas, and they mix with the stool particles and they stick on the flush pots. This is the melena stools. Hemodynamic instability, sometimes bleeding occurs is so much quantity that this causes the hypotension in the patient. self-limiting in 80% of the cases, and sometimes this also bleeding is so much that it causes the because of hemodynamic instability, it leads to the patient death, or sometimes because of the complication of the underlying disease, say some malignancy, this leads to the death of the patients. Now whenever the patient with upper GI bleeding presents to us, definitely there is excessive quantity of the blood loss. Then the blood loss is replaced with the blood transfusion. Sometimes the fresh plasma transfusion is needed. So, and IV fluids, because whenever the patient approaches in the emergency department with the bleeding from the upper GI tract, we don't have the immediate availability of the blood. We give the patient IV fluids in the form of Hemex cells or the normal saline or Ringer lactate. Meanwhile, blood sample is sent for cross matching, and when the blood comes, we immediately transfuse the blood. So these two steps are the stabilization of the blood pressure. IV line investigations, we perform the investigation to rule out the cause of the bleeding, CBC, INR, LFTs, renal profile, blood grouping and cross matching, and sometimes NG tube is required, and NG tube is passed and the bleeding comes out through the NG tube. Another form of nasogastric tube is the Sangster Blackmore tube. Sangster Blackmore tube is basically a tube with two balloons. It is just like a nasogastric tube. It is passed into the patient's upper balloon. When inflated, it causes compression at the lower end of the esophagus and stop bleeding, and lower balloon cause compression in the due to the air in the balloon in the stomach, and the bleeding stop. These tubes were previously used, but nowadays these are not used because advanced methods are available for control of the blood. As far as the management is concerned, for upper GI endoscopy is performed. Sometimes when the bleeding is small quantity, it is the diagnostic upper GI endoscopy or gastroscopy, and the second is in the chronic liver disease patient, when the varices occur or gastropathy is there, then we perform the therapeutic bending of the varices or sclerosis of the varices, and sometimes noradrenaline injections are injected in the stomach area where there is bleeding or due to the gastropathies. So the upper GI endoscopy is performed in these patients after stabilizing the patient. And the pharmacological therapies are the proton pump inhibitors like the omeprazole. Omeprazole is given to reduce the acidity, and octreotides like we give the patients to reduce the portal hypertensions like the sandostatin, and sometimes we give the other forms of to reduce the portal hypertension are the novapressin or terlipressins. These are given to reduce the portal hypertensions. Other is the option is the intra-arterial embolization. By this, if the bleeding is not stopped by these, if the cause of bleeding is not varices and some bleeding is going on like the angiodysplasias, we give the intra-arterial embolization, and embolization we stop the bleeding. Other procedure is the transvenous intrahepatic portosystemic shunts. This shunt procedure is performed in the patient usually with the chronic liver disease and cirrhosis. This is all for the upper GI bleeding. Because these are my short lectures in different topics, if you have any questions you can send to me. Other is the lower GI bleeding. I have already told you the demarcation from where the lower GI start. It started from the second part of the duodenum where the ligament softrates is attached, and from here to lower small intestine, then the cecum area, large intestine, transverse colon, sigmoid, and the anal canal. These are all the lower GI areas. Then the causes of the lower GI bleeds are the diverticulosis. Diverticulars are the small pockets like balloon like form on the wall of the intestine, and they are usually the cause of the bleeding. sometimes diverticulosis is the congenital disease, and they are converted into the malignancies. And other is the angioectasia or angiodysplasia. These are the small superficial vessels. These are abnormal vessels and they easily bleed, and they frequently bleed and cause the bleeding in the persons, and they lead to the anemia in these patients. Other is the neoplasm malignancy in the intestine, inflammatory bowel disease like the ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, anorectal diseases like hemorrhoids and fissures, they lead to the bleeding. And ischemic colitis is a condition, means blood supply to the colon is stopped due to some clot in the mesenteric vessels, and this leads to the decreased blood to the colon, and this results in ischemia. This also leads to the bleeding. Here is a picture with angiodysplasia. This is small angiodysplasia in the colon, and here are the abnormal blood vessels and they easily bleed. Now how the patient presents to us. Clinical hematochezia means fresh blood in the blood stools, and the other signs of the disease means abdominal pain, fever and toxicity, because some just like ulcerative colitis, this also leads to a toxic megacolon and different features. Hemodynamic status, like if the bleeding is so much excessive, then the blood pressure falls down and patient has the hemodynamic instability. These are the usual presentations of the patients, and other features are the disease specific presentations. Then how will we investigate these patients? We put the nasogastric tube in the patients, and then we perform the sigmoidoscopy, colonoscopy. These are the scopes. I will show you the picture. Then the nuclear bleeding scans and angiographies and capsule imaging. This is a picture of the capsule. Capsule is this is a small size capsule. It is ingested by the patient with the water. It goes to from the esophagus to the stomach, and then to the small intestine, and then the large intestine, and it is ultimately excreted from the anal canal. This is the new thing, and the small lights are attached. Here are the LED lights, and small cameras are attached to this, and it goes into the intestine and takes the pictures, and when it is excreted, these pictures are shown on the screens, and you can detect the disease in the intestine. This is the latest procedure thing. This is known as capsule endoscopy. It is now replacing the gastroscopy and colonoscopy very rapidly, because patient has a fear of the scope. This is a small capsule, just like other medicines capsule. It is ingested by the patient, and you get the inside of the gut. This is the flexible sigmoidoscopy. This is the scope is inserted into the anal canal and into the up to the sigmoids. Here is the small cameras attached to this and lights by which you can visualize inside of the colon. This is the sigmoid, and the colonoscope is also just like this scope, and it goes to the up to the large intestine from the ileocecal valve areas. Sigmoidoscope just goes up to that area, but the colonoscopy is a large scope tube. It goes up to the ileocecal valve area, and you get the inside of the picture of the inside of the colons. Here is the angiography of the intestine. Just like the cardiac angiography, we get the inject the dye and get the pictures in serials. And here is the angiography of the mesenteric area, and here is the, you can see the clot area, and the blood supply is stopped. Here also this is the area where the blood supply is narrowed down due to some clot or some atherosclerosis, and you get the picture. This is a picture just like picture of the cardiac angiography picture. Now the radionuclide scan, basically this is the new techniques. It is more advantageous to the imaging of the angiography, because it can detect the small bleeding up to 1 to 1.5 ml per minute bleeding which is occurring in the small intestine. It can be detected because we inject the radio labeled RBCs. When the RBCs are excreted in the small small bleeding areas, it can be detected by the radionuclide scan. This is the new technique. Here is the picture of the radionuclide scans. Just I want to show you the introduction of these techniques. You must know these investigations are available, so that you have the knowledge of these things, that these are the available techniques by which the GI bleeding can be investigated. Here is the picture of the radionuclide scan. Now the treatment, mostly the treatment is underlying the cause is treated, and the other is the therapeutic colonoscopy, if the by which you can inject the dye, you can inject the adrenaline or other sclerosing agents, and the other is the intra-arterial embolization, by which you can stop the small bleeding in angiodysplasia. Surgical treatment is the surgical resection of the area from where the bleeding occur, so that you can stop the bleeding by the surgical ways. So basically this is the treatment of the underlying cause. Here is the causes of the upper GI bleeding and lower GI bleedings. Now we discuss the carcinoma of the stomach. Carcinoma of the stomach, basically there are two types of the carcinoma of the stomach. First is the squamous cell carcinoma, other is the adenocarcinoma. Squamous cell carcinoma, the risk factor for the squamous cell carcinoma are the tylosis, Palmaris plantaris, achalasia, Plummer-Vinson syndrome, cigarette smoking, alcohol, chronic lye ingestion, human papilloma virus infection, radiation injury, and celiac spruce. And for the risk factor for the adenocarcinoma are the gastroesophageal reflux disease, which we have already discussed, Barrett's esophagus, bile reflux, and obesity. These are the causes of the risk factor for the esophageal malignancies. Signs and symptoms, definitely when they cause the mass-like projection in the esophagus and the ulceration in the esophagus, then signs symptoms are also according to these pathologies. This patient may present with dysphagia, difficulty, and odynophagia, painful swallowing, atypical or typical chest pains, GI bleeding, upper GI bleeding, nausea, vomiting, weight loss, and malnutrition. These are the usual presentation of the patients in the outpatient clinics. Then we move to the diagnosis. How we diagnose these patients? Barium swallow. This is a technique by which the barium is swallowed by the patient, and immediately X-rays of the patients are taken. Upper GI endoscopy. These are the endoscope tube with cameras, and you detect inside of the esophagus, and you take the biopsy of the lesion. CT of the chest is also performed, because this is a malignancy. Definitely it will metastasize to the other area, so by the CT scan chest with contrast you can detect the metastasis of the disease. Here is the picture of the barium swallow. Here is you will find the defect in the esophagus, because here the malignancy lies. This is the barium which is contrast material, and you take the X-ray immediately when the patient swallow it. This is a barium swallow. Now move to the treatment. Usually the treatment is the surgery, because of this malignancy the approach is very difficult, but the treatment option is the surgery. And other is when the tumor has metastasized. This is the adjuvant or new adjuvant chemo radiation therapy, means we give the drugs and radiation to these patients. These are the two options for the esophagus carcinoma, because the treatment options are very limited in this malignancy. Now we move to the acid peptic disease, peptic ulcer. Peptic ulcer, basically the ulcers present in the stomach and duodenum, they are both are included in the heading of the peptic ulcer disease or acid peptic disease, because the cause of ulceration in this area is due to the acid contents. Acid contents cause ulceration in the stomach or duodenum. So chronic gastritis or duodenal ulceration due to the acid contents is called the peptic ulcer disease. Patient's presentation are dyspepsia with variable relations to the meals. I will discuss with you what is the relationship of the gastric ulcer with the meal and duodenal ulcers relationship with the meal. Rhythmicity and periodicity, at which time of the day they are mostly present, and what is the relationship with the meal. Complications of the peptic ulcer is the bleeding and sometimes penetration of the ulcer and perforation occur, and other is the stricture forming, means narrowing occur in up to 20% of the patients. Here is the picture. You see this is the stomach, and if the ulcer occur in the stomach area, this is known as the gastric ulcer. If the ulcer occur in the duodenum, it is known as the duodenal ulcer, but we combined called both these ulcers as the peptic ulcers. Means in the heading of the peptic ulcer, both the gastric and duodenal ulcers are included. Here is the difference between the duodenal ulcer and the gastric ulcer. Duodenal ulcer, I have shown you the picture, occur in the duodenal area, and the gastric ulcers occur in the stomach area. So we see the age. Usually the duodenal ulcers occur in the 30 to 40 years of the age, but gastric ulcers usually occur late in the person's. Usually age is the 50 to 60 years of age. Both are more common in the male, and occupation mostly they are related with the stressful job. Stress basically increases the acidity, and they usually cause the ulceration. Pain, usually the duodenal ulcer pain is in the epigastric area, and this causes in discomfort. But in the gastric ulcer, epigastric area pain, and it radiates to the back, means patient point to the in the epigastric area or the stomach area, and other hand on the back of his upper abdomen, and patient usually says pain start from the front and it goes backward. So this is usually the say symptoms of the patients. But in the duodenal ulcer, it remained in the epigastric area. Onset, definitely when the meal goes to the duodenal area, it will cause the pain. So it occurs 2 to 3 hours after the eating, or in the midnight area, because the when the you start eating, 2 to 3 hours food remain in the stomach for the proper digestion, then it goes to the duodenum. Whenever it goes to the duodenum, ulcerative area, when it touches the ulcerative area, patient immediately feels pain. In gastric ulcer, pain occur immediately after eating. When we eat the food, acid secretion occurs from the parietal cells, and the acidity increases in the stomach, and the patient immediately feels pain. And aggravated by the hunger, and it is aggravated by the eating. Whenever eating is increased, pain also occur in the stomach areas, because whenever he eats, pain immediately starts. Now we discuss what are the major causes of the acid peptic disease or acid peptic ulcer, which causes these ulceration formation in the stomach and duodenal ulcers. Number one cause for the ulcer is the H. pylori gastritis. This is a small bacteria which lies in the wall of the stomach or in the duodenum, and it causes the increased acid secretion and ultimately leads to the ulceration. Other is the chronic NSAIDs intake. NSAIDs are the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like the Disprin, Brufen. These are taken and they cause the ulceration. Other is the smoking, cigarette smoking. They also change the acid contents in the stomach. And then the less common causes are the Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, like the gastrinoma secretes a gastrin which stimulates the Praetor cell, results in acid hypersecretions. This is the Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Other is the stress ulcers and other ulcers, and these ulcers must be excluded from the malignancies. In the malignancies like the gastric carcinoma, the erosion of the mucosa of the stomach occur. So these if the ulcer is not healing, then we must go for the endoscopy and take the biopsy, because sometimes it is simple ulcer, sometimes it is the malignant ulcer, and this should be treated then accordingly. Complication of the ulcer is the acid peptic ulcer is the hemorrhage. Sometimes bleeding occurs so much way that this is the cause of the upper GI bleeding. Then next complication is the perforation and penetration, and then pyloric stricture because of the fibrosis formation. The opening of the pylorus becomes narrowed down, so this causes the pyloric obstruction. Here are the pictures. This is the active oozing from the ulcer. You see the reddish area from where the ulcer bleeding occur. Then this is the second picture of the same area where the adrenaline injection has injected into the patient and the bleeding stopped, and there you can see clearly the ulcer area from where the bleeding was occurring. So this is the ulcer, and this is called the bleeding. And now the treatment given is the adrenaline injection to the stomach area, and the bleeding stop, and you see the ulcerative areas. Number one cause of the acid gastric ulcer is the H. pylori infection. This is a bacterial infection, and this is usually acquired by the contaminated water. So be careful in drinking water. Sometimes it may contain the H. pylori bacteria. When we use a water which is not properly filtered out, then we acquire the infection. Usually at some hotels or shops we drink water and they are not properly sterilized water, and they cause the infection to us. These occurs up to the 10% of the developed ulcer. This is cause, and this cause both duodenal and gastric ulcer. Sometimes it also cause the malignancy in the stomach. This is also an important cause of malignancy in the stomach. So H. pylori infection is very important to detect, because this is not treated by ordinarily means के proton pump inhibitor like the omeprazole. We have to treat this bacteria, then the gastritis is relieved. If you are suspecting the H. pylori infection, then we investigate it by performing the serology for H. pylori infection. This is a test. Usually IgG and IgA tests are performed for the H. pylori detection. Fecal antigen immunoassay means H. pylori antigen is detected in the feces, in the stool test. This is performed in the stool. Other is the urea breath test, which is performed, and other is the endoscopy or gastroscopy. You take the biopsy of the ulcerative area or the gastritis area, and you see the histopathologically, and by that you detect this gastritis or ulcer is due to some H. pylori infection. This is the endoscopy or gastroscopy method. This is the TV screen by which you are actually visualizing the area. This is the scope. This is put in from the mouth into the stomach. Here you see in the esophagus and into stomach, and here is the ulcer area. By this endoscopy, there is camera attached at this area, and this is the light source. You detect the ulcer in the stomach wall, and this is the shown on the monitor or TV where you will actually see the ulcerative area. This is the gastroscopy by which you detect the ulcers in the stomach or duodenum. This is another picture of the gastroscopic picture. There is the ulcerative area in the stomach area, gastric area. This is the duodenal ulcer. This picture is taken by the gastroscopically. Now the H. pylori gastritis treatment with acid secretions like the proton pump inhibitor is performed. Previously for the acid peptic disease we usually give the proton pump inhibitor, but I have already told you that this is not the definite treatment. Whenever the as far as the H. pylori bacteria are there in the stomach area, this will again and again cause the gastritis, and patient will have the same symptom after stopping the treatment. So we usually do the eradication therapy for the with the help of antibiotics. This is the permanent cure, means bacteria are destroyed or killed by this treatment with acid suppression therapy. More common regime which are employed and which usually I practice is the clarithromycin, which is available in the with the name of the Clarisid, and amoxicillin. This is same name is available, and these are given for the 2 weeks, mean 14 days. Along with this, proton pump inhibitor like omeprazole is given for the 1 month. This is the treatment, one of the treatment regime for the H. pylori gastritis. And by this 2 antibiotics with omeprazole, we are actually eradicating the bacteria from the stomach area. So this is the all for the H. pylori gastritis or H. pylori infection. Other causes of the gastritis or ulcer are the NSAIDs use. We usually ask the patient that to stop taking the NSAIDs, and if you have the pain, replace this with the paracetamol or some drugs, celecoxib class of the drugs, which usually do not cause the gastritis. So we usually actually replace the painkillers or ask the patient to stop the using the painkiller drugs. So this is the all for the acid peptic disease. Now we move to the next topic. This is the irritable bowel syndrome. This is the more common disease which occur in the young persons. This is the basically a functional disorder. This is not a pathological disease. This is the functional disorder. Patient usually presents with abdominal pain or discomfort with alteration in the bowel habits. Means patient has either increased frequency of the stool or constipation. Along with this abdominal pain or discomfort, and there is no pathological cause, means there is absence of any structural or biochemical abnormality in this patient, means the patient is absolutely normal with respect to structural and biochemically. Though no clear diagnostic test is available. Basically this is the disease of exclusion. We exclude other diseases and then we diagnose it as the irritable bowel syndrome. This diagnosed basically on its clinical features. We perform the test to exclude other diseases, but this is purely a diagnosis of the exclusion, and it is diagnosed with the help of the clinical presentations. This is occur usually 10 to 20% of the adults have the IBS, and there is a female preponderance, mean females have the more IBS than the male person, because usually they take the small things very seriously, and they usually this usually results in IBS. And up to the 50% of the patients have the dyspepsia, means they have the some acidity in the stomach area or acidity in the epigastric area. So the usual presentations of the patient is the abdominal pain, as I have already told you, abdominal pain, altered bowel habits. Patient has either the diarrhea or constipation, gas and flatulence, means bloating sensation in the abdomen, and the upper GI symptoms like dyspepsia, heartburn, nausea, vomiting. These are the all the usually presentations of the patients. They usually comes to us with the abdominal pain. Doctor, I have the abdominal pain, dyspepsia, either have increased frequency of the stool. Whenever I eat something, I have to go to the immediately to the washroom for the stool. So these are the usually presentations, and this is usually due to the psychological causes. as I have told you, psychology. So psychosocial abnormality, up to the 80% of the IBS patient have the other psychiatric feature. One of the psychiatric feature will be the IBS, and other psychiatric features may be patient have the anxiety or depressive disorder. So this may be the an important psychiatric feature, that patient have the increased frequency of the stool or constipation. Other causes may be the enteric infection, small amount or altered gut flora, visceral hypersensitivity or abnormal motility. But the main focus is that patient has some psychiatric feature, and this is the important sign and symptom of some psychiatric disease, maybe anxiety or depression or other cause of the psychiatric problem. There are many causes of the increased frequency of the stool or the dyspepsia. The one cause may be inflammatory bowel disease, means ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. Hyperthyroidism, you have the increased secretion of the thyroid glands. This also causes increased motility in the stomach, and the only problem is that patient has the increased frequency of the stool. Otherwise, structurally intestine is okay. Infections, sometimes patient have the low grade infection like giardiasis infection. This is a low grade infection, and patient has the increased frequency of the stool. Parasites, they also cause the increased frequency of the stool. Malabsorption diseases like the celiac disease, bacterial overgrowth, lactose intolerance, colonic neoplasm, and some other psychiatric diseases. So this is the differential diagnosis of the increased frequency of the stool. We exclude these diseases, then we diagnose that patient has the IBS. Then the treatment is, because this is the mostly this psychiatric problem, treatment also in the same direction: reassurance and education and support to the patient. Give the education, means you send the patient to some psychologist who give the reassurance, education and support. Dietary therapy, fiber and stool bulking agents are usually given. Antispasmodic, if the patient have the pain in the abdomen, we give the antispasmodic agent to have the symptomatic relief. Anti-diarrheal agents are given to reduce the frequency of the stool, because the intestine is 100% okay. We give the anti-diarrheal agents just to decrease the frequency of the stool. Laxatives are given to the patients who have the symptoms of the constipations, because I have already told you there are two main presentation: diarrhea and constipation. Other is the psychotropic agent like the tricyclic antidepressants are given, SSRI are some given, and serotonin receptor agonist and antagonist are given, and non-absorbable antibiotics like rifaximin and neomycin are also given, and probiotics like Bifidobacterium infantis, this is also option. So these are the all options, and the one or two option is used for the treatment of the patient with IBS. So the all drugs are not given simultaneously. I am telling you these drugs can be used one or two. So treatment depends upon the symptoms and severity, means if the patient have the diarrhea or the antispasmodic pain, so we give the antispasmodic drug to the patients who have the spasmodic pain. Other is the psychiatric aspect: education, reassurance, lifestyle modification. These are all important components of the now we discuss the celiac disease. Celiac disease is basically a disease, just like I have already teach you the rheumatic fever, in which you focus is in the throat. Antibodies are formed against the streptococcal infection in the throats, and antibodies reacts in the heart valves and in the joints area. So in this disease, the antibodies are formed against the gluten, and they act on the intestinal mucosa, usually the small intestinal, first jejunal mucosa, first part of the small intestinal mucosa, and this causes the destruction or the of the mucosa of the intestine. So This is the, we call it the, also call it as the gluten sensitivity enteropathies. This is because this is the intestinal mucosal injury resulting from immunological intolerance to gluten, means antibodies are formed against the gluten and they react on the intestine. The gluten is basically present in the cereals, wheats, rye and the barley, and this disease is most common in the Europe and more common in the females and in the first degree relative. These cases also comes in our country, and but the cases are less in number in our region. This is more common in the European region, and this is the presentation of the patient occur usually in the early childhood when the feeding with the milk is stopped and it is replaced with some cereals. Cereals contain gluten and immediately the antibodies are formed and they react on the intestinal mucosa and the patients have the diarrheal symptoms. So this is the gluten sensitive disease. So small intestinal mucosa's abnormality occur due to the immunological response to gliadin. Gliadin basically is a component of the gluten. This is more specific. We can say that gluten is cause, cereals are cause of the celiac disease, and in the cereals gluten is the cause of the celiac disease, and in the gluten gliadin part or gliadin component is the cause of the disease because the antibodies are formed against the gliadin. So this cause the subtotal villus atrophy of the mucosa. If we take the biopsy, villus are the small in height. So the clinical presentation mostly, as I have already told you, occur in the children within the 6 months of the age when you start the weaning. Previously child was on the milk, now at the 6th month of the age weaning from the milk to the some cereals started. Whenever the mother gives to the cereals to the child, the patient have the symptoms of the celiac disease. Symptoms are the irritability, stool are in large quantity, they are pale, means patients have the diarrheal symptoms, abdominal distension, anemia because frequently diarrhea, the food contents are not absorbed, growth retardation because child is not getting the proper nutrition due to the diarrhea. Sometimes it presents in the adults, but the very less commonly in the adults. The patient have this start of disease in the adult life, but the same symptoms are the same. It may have the diarrhea, weight loss, vitamins deficiency, hypoproteinemia, bone pain, because all these are the nutritional deficiencies in the patients. Bone pain due to the vitamin D and calcium deficiency, peripheral neuropathy because the B12 and folic acid and all B complexes are not absorbed, so patients have the neuropathies in the body. So we can say usual presentation is in the childhood and less rare presentation is in the adulthood, but in both the cases patient have the symptoms of the malabsorption. Patient have the diarrhea, patient have the abdominal distension, and the patient due to frequently diarrhea is child's growth is retarded, and it has the anemia and all the presentations of the nutritional deficiency. As we concerned in from the dentistry, the patients with the enteric fever, they have the enamel tooth defects. You are seeing the tooth picture. The enamel is lost from the tooth. So this type of the teeth appeared in the patients with the celiac disease. Sometimes the celiac disease has the in addition to the abdominal symptoms are sometimes isolated skin presentation. This is known as the dermatitis herpetiform. These are the small macules are formed on the back, sometimes on the front of the chest. These small itchy macules are formed on the back of the chest. This is associated with the celiac disease. The skin manifestation, we can say skin manifestation of the celiac disease is the dermatitis herpetiform. Sometimes in the MCQs or question this is asked, what is the skin or dermatological manifestation. Sometimes it is asked, what are the dental manifestation of the celiac disease. I have shown you both the pictures. Now the investigations are concerned. We perform the investigations because of the nutritional deficiencies. We perform the blood complete examination, serum ferritin, red blood cell folate level, B12 level, serum calcium, alkaline phosphatase level, albumin and prothrombin levels. And anti-gliadin antibodies IgG and IgA are performed because antibodies are formed against the gliadin, and IgA and the endomysial antibodies and tissue transglutaminase antibodies are done. Jejunal biopsy is performed where we see the subvillous atrophy. This jejunal biopsy is taken with the help of the gastroscope. Other investigation is the small bowel follow through is performed where the jejunal area is seen as abnormal. So these are the basic investigations performed in the patient with the celiac disease. Here, this is the gastroscopic picture of the small intestine in the celiac disease. This is the healthy villus in the small intestine, and these are the atrophy of the villus, means villus becomes small in height. Their atrophy occurs. This is the normal villus. So these are shown by the gastroscopy. Other is the complication in these patients. There is increased frequency of the intestinal T cell lymphoma, and other is the carcinoma of the small intestine and esophageal carcinoma. Ulcerative jejunitis means inflammation of the jejunum, because this disease primarily affect in the jejunal area, which is the part of the small intestine. It is when the duodenum ends, the jejunum starts. Other is the complications due to the nutritional deficiencies like the vitamin D. Patient have the vitamin D and calcium, bone pain, muscles pain, growth retardation. These are all complications of the celiac disease. More important is this, sometimes it's converted into the malignancy. Management is the because the disease is not treatable in the sense that we cannot stop producing the antibodies. So whenever the patient takes a gluten diet, cereals, it has diarrhea start or abdominal symptoms starts. So we advise these patients to have the gluten-free diet, like rice, maize, potatoes should be taken because they do not have the gluten. Moreover, the gluten-free products or bakery items are also now available in the market. Moreover, the flour which is gluten-free is also available in the market. Other is that minerals and vitamin supplements are given because these deficiencies occur frequently in the celiac disease patient. Other is that for the refractive patients we give the immunosuppressive therapy so that the antibodies production is reduced. We give these patients corticosteroids, azathioprine or cyclosporine. These are the immunosuppressive drugs which are sometimes used in the refractory cases, because if the patient we are losing the patient, then we employed these drug treatments because other management is not effective. So corticosteroids and azathioprines are used as a last option. So this is all for today's topics. I have told you the multiple topics. These are the small topics which were covered, and you must know all these topics. Sometimes questions come in these areas. If you have any question, if you have some understanding problem in any topic, you can send to me in my WhatsApp or in the Facebook group. I will answer you. Thank you very much.